So, we usually think of benevolence and evil as, absolute opposites, right? Like they sit on entirely different ends of the moral spectrum.
Right, completely opposite.
Yeah, but well, what if pure kindness is actually the most destructive force in your life? And what if true compassion actually requires a willingness to be entirely unapologetically cruel?
It's it's a pretty wild thought.
It really is. So, welcome to today's deep dive. I know you listening right now, you love learning and, finding those big aha moments. So, we're getting right into it today. We're looking at a profoundly challenging essay by an author named Suifeng, and the translation we're looking at was edited by Kinyu, and it's titled quite fittingly Benevolent Evil.
Yeah, and it's a piece of writing that argues our deepest nurturing instincts might actually be the very things holding us and like all of humanity back.
Which is heavy. I mean, it's a premise that instantly puts you on the defensive.
Oh, 100%. Because, when we look at how society operates, we prioritize safety, care, the removal of obstacles for the people we love. But this text just completely upends that framework.
Right. It asks us to consider that removing obstacles is, well, not an act of love, but an act of sabotage.
Exactly. And the author doesn't start by, you know, attacking complex political structures or citing heavy philosophical stuff.
No, no, they start with something incredibly primal. The whole origin of this idea comes from, of all things, watching television.
Right, the nature documentary.
Yeah, specifically a show called Animal World. So the author describes this scene focused on a tall tree. High up in the branches, there's a bird's nest. And a mother bird is actively, aggressively driving her own chick out of the nest.
And this isn't like a gentle nudge either.
Not at all. The chick doesn't even have all of its feathers yet.
Yeah, the physical reality of the scene in the text is actually really distressing. You have this young bird that is just absolutely panicking.
Oh, I bet.
It's terrified of the sheer drop below, and it's desperately trying to squeeze its way back into the center of the nest, just to hide.
But the mother bird shows, like, zero sympathy.
Rather, zero. She is squawking, she's flapping her wings, she's just relentless in blocking the chick's retreat. She refuses to give it even an inch of space to feel safe.
Until, inevitably, she just forces the issue. The young bird physically tumbles out of the tree.
Right.
It's flapping clumsily, falling through the air for the very first time, and it lands completely ungracefully down on the grass below.
And the mother bird just, watches?
Yeah, she just flies down to a nearby branch and calmly starts preening her feathers. Like, she didn't just push her child to a potential death. But then the author notes the aftermath.
Which is the crucial part.
Right. The chick realizes it isn't dead. It realizes it can hop, it can chirp.
The transformation is immediate. The terror of the fall is replaced by this discovery of agency.
Yeah.
The author imagines the young bird looking up and saying, like, Mom, look, I can fly. I can hop on the ground. Yeah. Suddenly the chick is catching its own insects.
Oh.
The realization dawns that life outside the nest is vastly freer and more comfortable than being crammed in a pile of twigs waiting for someone else to bring you a worm.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because reading this, I couldn't help but think about taking the training wheels off a kid's bicycle.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. As a parent, when you take those training wheels off, you have to physically let go of the seat. You absolutely know the kid is going to wobble.
They're definitely going to fall.
Exactly. They're going to fall, scrape their knee, and look at you like you just betrayed their ultimate trust. And in that exact moment, from the kid's perspective, you're being incredibly mean.
Oh, you're the villain.
Totally. You are stripping away their safety net without their consent. But, as the adult, you possess the foresight to know that this brief moment of terror, this perceived cruelty, it's the only mechanical way they will ever experience the actual thrill of balance and momentum.
What's fascinating here is how the author takes this natural biological imperative and uses it to diagnose human behavior.
Right.
The core thesis introduced is this fundamental conflict between short-term perceived cruelty and long-term flourishing. The mother bird isn't acting out of a lack of sympathy.
She actually has a higher form of it.
Exactly, a more essential form. Because if she gives in to the chick's cries, if she exhibits what the author calls pure kindness and lets it stay, what happens?
It starves.
Right, it eventually starves.
Right.
Or the nest becomes too heavy, or it just becomes easy prey. The nest, which feels like the ultimate sanctuary, is actually a tomb if you stay in it too long. So the mother's quote-unquote evil action is deeply benevolent because it's the non-negotiable prerequisite for the chick's survival.
Which is a profound observation of nature. But The author doesn't just leave it as an observation, right? They decide to bring this benevolent evil into their own human household.
Yeah, this is where it gets really personal.
Very. They lay out the timeline of how they raised their own child using this exact philosophy, and it is intense. They accelerate the path to self-sufficiency to a degree that, I mean, most modern parents would probably find shocking.
The text details a very rigid, highly structured dismantling of the child's dependency.
Yeah, starting at age 13, the author makes the child entirely responsible for cooking the family's dinner.
Wow, every night.
Yep. And then at 14, the kid is learning to drive. By 16, they are driving themselves to school, and they're pushed to compete for and win the position of general manager of student company.
That's a lot of responsibility for a 16-year-old.
Right. But the author establishes this absolute rule. If the child is physically and mentally capable of handling a task, the parent will refuse to do it for them. No exceptions.
And that philosophy, it really reaches its absolute crucible when the child is ready for university.
Oh, yeah. The university phase is where the rubber really meets the road. The author tells their child they can choose a university anywhere, the US, the UK, Australia, South Africa, wherever.
But there's a catch.
A huge catch. The author explicitly refuses to pay for elite, highly expensive schools like Harvard or MIT. The financial safety net is just pulled.
So the kid is on their own.
Completely. The child is forced to independently research, contact schools, and navigate the application process entirely on their own, eventually landing a spot at a top 100 global university in the US.
Incredible.
At 18, this kid has to leave the human nest permanently.
And the logistical hurdles placed on an 18-year-old here are just significant. I mean, they are solely responsible for going to the US and UK embassies to secure their own visas.
Which is terrifying for an adult.
Right. They book their own international flights, arrive in a foreign country alone, figure out university registration, find an apartment to rent, and navigate a foreign banking system to open accounts, completely unassisted.
See, but I have to push back on this framework a bit, because reading this, a part of me thought, is this actual genius parenting, or is this just a highly intellectualized rationalization for parental neglect?
That's a very fair question.
I mean, it's very convenient to say, oh, I'm not helping you with your visa or your housing because I'm practicing benevolent evil. Isn't it possible the author just didn't want to do the grueling, tedious work of parenting a teenager through a major life transition?
That is the exact tension the author is playing with.
Yeah.
And they are fully aware of how it looks from the outside.
They are.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The author explicitly mentions that neighbors and acquaintances envied them for having such an obedient and sensible child.
Right, because the results looked great.
Exactly. The neighbors looked at the result, this highly capable, independent young adult, and assumed it was the product of traditional, highly involved nurturing. They had no idea the author viewed their own methodology as intentionally evil.
Wow.
So to address your pushback, the author's logic is that doing the tedious work for the child is the actual abdication of parental duty.
Because you're basically starving their competence.
Yes. The author sets up a very stark philosophical binary here. Pure kindness ultimately harms oneself and others. Only benevolent evil can save both.
So doing things for them is harmful.
In the author's view, the psychological damage of over-nurturing is severe. When you fill out your child's forms, when you clear their obstacles, you are communicating to them that they are incapable of surviving the friction of the real world.
You're actively fostering a psychology of dependency.
Exactly. Benevolent evil requires the parent to endure the child's struggle, their frustration, and potentially their resentment in the short term, just to forge an independent adult.
Okay, so we see how this forced independence works in the highly controlled environment of a single household. But the author's real ambition in this essay is testing whether this concept of benevolent cruelty scales.
Right, moving from the micro to the macro.
Exactly. Can you treat an entire society of millions of citizens the same way you treat a teenager? The essay shifts from a personal memoir into a sweeping, macro-level societal critique.
And the author argues that this exact same method is not just applicable but entirely necessary for governing what they term society's ignorant people.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because the author starts defining who these ignorant people are. They describe them as individuals who refuse to listen to reason, people who remain totally unmoved even when facing life-threatening dangers.
and they offer a solution for this.
They do. Now, the author explicitly rejects the idea of a fascist dictatorship, calling it inhumane and totally off the table. But they present benevolent evil as the only viable alternative to deal with four specific groups: nature destroyers, lazy parasites, troublemakers, and fanatics.
The underlying argument here is really one of existential urgency. The author believes that if a governing body simply waits for these specific groups to understand reason through gentle persuasion or pure kindness, the delay will just result in catastrophic damage to the entire human ecosystem.
So they have to step in.
Right. Therefore, the governing force must employ evil, meaning forced, uncomfortable, and non-negotiable consequences, to rescue both the ignorant individuals and the broader society.
Yeah, and to understand the sheer scale of the author's argument, and honestly, as a quick side note, I want to be explicitly clear to you, the listener, right now. We are remaining entirely impartial here.
Absolutely.
We are not taking a side or endorsing the author's views on freedom or politics. We're simply reporting the framework the author has laid out in the text to understand how far he extends this metaphor.
Right. We're just unpacking the logic.
Exactly. So we have to look at the analogies the author uses. They liken citizens to children in immediate physical danger. They ask, if a kid who can't swim insists on jumping into a rushing river, do you let them?
Of course not.
Or if someone doesn't understand electricity but wants to grab a high-voltage wire, do you let them?
The instinctual answer is no. You physically restrain them, even if they fight you, because their temporary anger is preferable to their death.
Exactly, but then the author maps that exact same life or death logic onto highly complex political and cultural concepts. They argue that if, quote, people without faith demand freedom, or if people who do not understand Chinese culture and the human spiritual world insist on advocating for private ownership, the governing authority shouldn't just let them follow their whims.
That's quite a leap.
It's a huge leap. The author equates demanding Western-style private ownership without understanding the underlying cultural spirituality to a child grabbing a high-voltage wire.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is classic paternalism operating on a massive societal scale.
Paternalism, right?
Yeah, paternalism is the philosophy that the ruling authority fundamentally knows what is required for the survival of the populace better than the populace knows for itself.
Like the mother bird.
Exactly. In the author's framework, the concepts of freedom and private ownership are viewed as behavioral nests. They are material or ideological comforts that breed selfishness and individualism at the expense of collective harmony.
But wait, I mean, isn't that just a convenient excuse for tyranny?
Yeah.
It's one thing to let a teenager stumble while booking a flight so they learn resilience. But when a ruling authority decides that citizens demanding freedom are just ignorant chicks who don't know what's good for them, doesn't that justify pushing people off literally any cliff the authority chooses? It feels like a very dangerous blank check.
It is a profoundly dangerous blank check, if misused, which is exactly why the author goes out of their way to denounce fascist dictatorships.
But how do they separate the two?
However, the author's counter-argument relies entirely on the purity of the authority's intention. They argue that just as the mother bird gains nothing personal from pushing the chick, she does it purely for the chick's survival. A truly benevolent authority restricts certain freedoms not to oppress, but to prevent self-destruction.
So it's all about intent.
Right. The author views the general public as unfeathered birds who mistakenly believe that staying in the nest of their own individualistic desires is true freedom. The authority's restriction is framed as a necessary, agonizing intervention.
Wow. Which brings us to the final and undoubtedly the most intense escalation of the essay. The author moves from theories of political governance to a genuinely apocalyptic warning.
Yeah, the tone shifts drastically here.
It really does. They claim that humanity is currently standing on the edge of a precipice, facing an immense species-level disaster. And the reason we are on this precipice is a staggering statistic the author provides. 98% of people are currently stuck in the nest.
And that 98% figure is meant to shock the reader. It highlights the author's conviction that almost the entire global population is trapped in a state of deep psychological and structural dependency.
And the author refuses to leave the nest as a vague poetic metaphor. They explicitly name exactly what these macro-level nests are, and they spare no one.
No, they don't.
First, they define all authoritarian systems as nests. They describe these systems as places where people are just crowded together, fussing around, surviving day to day with absolutely no real prospects for future elevation.
But they don't stop there.
No. Then they target the other side of the human experience. They state that all religions are also nests.
which is a highly radical posture.
Very.
The text describes religions as places where people are essentially dreaming with their eyes closed for extended periods. The author argues that traditional faith is passive. It's a way to hide from the harsh, active reality of self-actualization.
It's a comfort zone.
Precisely. By labeling both authoritarian state systems and traditional religious systems as nests, the author is systematically dismantling the primary institutions where humanity has historically sought safety, order, and meaning.
They're saying that the church and the state are both just giant piles of twigs keeping you from actually flying.
Exactly.
So if authoritarian governments are out and all major world religions are out, what is actually left?
Right. Where do we go?
This is the grand reveal of the text. The author introduces an entity called Lifechanyuan. In the context of Xuefeng's broader writings, Lifechanyuan is presented as a new spiritual and lifestyle community, a sort of ultimate transcendent family for humanity.
And its role is crucial here.
Yeah, in this essay, Lifechanyuan is explicitly cast as the mother bird.
It positions Lifechanyuan as the necessary disruptor of the modern age. Its singular defining purpose is to drive the young birds, meaning us, the 98% of humanity, out of all these comfortable societal and religious nests so we can finally understand the mechanism of benevolent evil and achieve true spiritual independence.
So what does this all mean? When you step back and look at the trajectory of this single essay, the sheer audacity is staggering.
It covers so much ground.
It really does. We started by analyzing the instinctual behavior of a bird on a television documentary. We moved to the psychology of raising a resilient teenager. We scaled up to a defense of paternalistic governance. And we arrived at a sweeping mandate to abandon the entire world's established political and religious systems in favor of a radically new community structure.
This raises an important question about the final ultimatum the author presents to the reader. The essay concludes with a remarkably stark binary choice. Soar into the world and it becomes yours. Remain behind and it leads to a dead end.
It really is fly or die. There's no negotiation.
Yes. The author leaves absolutely no room for middle ground. You cannot stay in the nest and just try to rearrange the twigs to make it a little more comfortable.
Right.
You cannot reform the authoritarian system or modernize the religion. The benevolent evil, the sheer terror and discomfort of forced expulsion from everything familiar, is presented as the only viable path to survival and true freedom. To reject the push of the mother bird is to choose your own destruction.
It is an incredibly heavy, demanding philosophical framework. We've covered some immense ground today.
We really have.
We've explored how benevolent evil challenges our most basic instincts to nurture, protect, and coddle. We see the logic in the mother bird forcing her chick to face the terrifying reality of gravity.
And the human equivalent of that.
Yeah, we understand the necessity of the parent refusing to clear every obstacle for their teenager, allowing them to build the competence required for adulthood. We've analyzed how the author attempts to scale that logic up to justify a paternalistic approach to society, restricting the ignorant from grabbing the high-voltage wires of destructive ideologies.
And finally, that huge societal leap.
Right. Ultimately, we see the demand to abandon our deepest societal and religious comforts.
It forces the reader to confront the long-term, potentially devastating consequences of prioritizing their immediate comfort over their ultimate growth.
It absolutely does. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that pushes just a bit beyond the boundaries of the text we've explored today.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, the author tells us that Lifechanyuan is the ultimate mother bird, right? The necessary force waiting to push humanity out of every nest, every religion, every political system, and every comfort zone we've ever known. But if the ultimate goal of all this benevolent evil is total, unencumbered independence, what happens when you finally learn to fly?
Oh, that is the ultimate paradox of any guiding philosophy.
Exactly. Is it possible that any organization, any philosophy, or any community claiming to be the ultimate guide to your spiritual and physical freedom is eventually just another nest you will eventually need to be pushed out of?
That's a fascinating thought to leave on.
Take some time today to look at your own life. What structural, emotional, or ideological nests are you currently hiding in? And who or what might be the benevolent evil waiting to finally push you over the edge so you can realize you know how to fly? Keep learning, keep questioning, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.